Yamunatira vanachari. Yamunatira vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtara Shata Srimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtara Shata Srimad, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय, मथुरा धाम की जय, नवद्वीप धाम की जय, जगन्नाथपुर धाम की जय, गंगा यमुना की जय, तुलसी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय, समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय। जय गो प्रेमानंदे। All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Glories to Shri Guru Govinda. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Right. Good morning, everyone. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 4th chapter, verses 35 to 39. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Shuka Vacha Itistuta Samstuvata Satasmin Agamarshane Pradura Shrit Guru Shrestha Bhagavan Bhaktavatsala Kritapada Suparnamshe Pralambashta Mahabhuja Chakra Shankha Sicharmeshu Dhanupasha Gadadara Pitavasa Ganashyama Prasana Vadanekshana Vanamala Nivitango Lasat Srivatsa Kaustuba Mahakir Kirita Kataka Spuramakara Kundala Kanchanguliya Valaya Nupuran Gada Bhushita Trailokya Mohanam Rupam Bibratri Bhuvaneshwara Vrito Narada Nandandyai Parshadai Surayutpai Stuyamano Nugayadbi Siddha Gandharva Charanai. That's a lot of word-to-word translations, so let's go. Shri Shuka Vacha, Shri Shukadeva Goswami said, E.T. thus, Tuta, being praised, Samstuvata of Daksha who was offering prayers, Saha, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Tasmin, in that, Agamarshane, holy place celebrated as Agamarshana, Pradurashit appeared, Kuru Shrestha, O best of Kuru dynasty, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhaktavatsala, who is very kind to his devotees, Kritapada, whose lotus feet were placed, Suparna Amshe, on the shoulders of his carrier Garuda, Pralamba, very long, Ashtamaha Bhujaha, possessing 8 mighty arms, Chakra, disc, Shankha, conch shell, Asi, sword, Charma, shield, Ishu, arrow, Danu, bow, Pasha, rope, Gada, club, Dara, holding, Pitavasa, with yellow garments, Gana, Ganashyama, whose bodily hue was intense blue-black, Prashana, very cheerful, Vadana, whose face, Ikshana, and glance, Vanamala, by a garland of forest flowers, Nivita Anga, whose body was adorned from the neck down to the feet, Lasat, shining, Shivatsa, Kaustuba, the jewel known as Kaustuba and the mark of Srivatsa, Mahakirita, of a very large and gorgeous helmet, Kataka, a circle, Spurat, glittering, Makara Kundala, earrings resembling sharks, Kanchi, with a belt, Angulia, finger rings, Valya, bracelets, Nupura, ankle bells, Angada, upper arm bracelets, Bushita, decorated, Trilokya Mohanam, captivating the 3 worlds, Rupam, his bodily features, Bibrat, shining Tribhuvana of the 3 worlds, Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, Vrita surrounded Narada by exalted devotees headed by Narada, Nanda Adyai and others like Nanda, Parshadai, who are all eternal associates, Sura Yudhapai, as well as by the heads of the demigods, Stuyamana, being glorified, Anugayadbhi, singing after him, Siddha Gandharva Charanai, by the Siddhas, Gandharvas, and Charanas. Translation. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is extremely affectionate to his devotees, was very pleased by the prayers offered by Daksha, and thus he appeared at the holy place known as Angamarshana. O Maharaj Parikshit, best of the Kuru dynasty, the Lord's lotus feet rested on the shoulders of his carrier Garuda, and he appeared with 8 long, mighty, beautiful arms. In his hands he held a disc, conch shell, sword, shield, arrow, bow, rope, and club. In each hand a different weapon, all brilliantly shining. His garments were yellow, and his bodily hue was deep bluish. His eyes and face were very cheerful, and from his neck to his feet hung a long garland of flowers. His chest was decorated with a Kaustuba jewel and a mark of Shivatsa. On his head was a gorgeous round helmet, and his ears were decorated with earrings resembling sharks. All these ornaments were uncommonly beautiful. The Lord wore a golden belt on his waist, bracelets on his arms, rings on his fingers, and ankle bells on his feet. Thus decorated by various ornaments, Lord Hari, who is attractive to all living entities of the 3 worlds, is known as Purushottama, the best personality. He was accompanied by great devotees like Narada, Nanda, and all the principal demigods, led by the heavenly king Indra, and the residents of various upper planetary systems such as Siddhaloka, Gandharvaloka, and Charnaloka, situated on both sides of the Lord, and behind him as well, his devotees offered him prayers continuously. There's no purport, so we're going to go to the next verse. Rupam tad mahataschariyam vichakshaya gata sadavasa nanama dandavat bhumau prahristatma prajapati. Seeing that wonderful and effulgent form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prajapati Daksha was first somewhat afraid, but then he was very pleased to see the Lord, and he fell to the ground like a stick to offer his respects to the Lord. Verse 41. Na kinchano de rayutum asakka tivraya muda apurita manodvarai radinya iva charai. As rivers are filled by water flowing from a mountain, all of Daksha's senses were filled with pleasure. Because of his highly elevated happiness, Daksha could not say anything, but simply remained flat on the ground. Purport. When one actually realizes or sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is filled with complete happiness. For example, when Dhruva Maharaj saw the Lord in his presence, he said, Swamin kirtartos mi varam nayache. My dear Lord, I have nothing to ask from you. Now I am completely satisfied. Similarly, when Prajapati Daksha saw the Supreme Lord in his presence, he simply fell flat, unable to speak or ask him for anything. End of the purport. Okay. Omagyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayarupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, good morning. So we are in the section of this chapter, in a canto called Prescribed Duties for Mankind, in chapter 4, where Prajapati Daksha has attained the best result he could have ever attained by pleasing the Lord, by his vandanam, by his prayers. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead has appeared in his all opulence, which is fully described here in this verse, in this series of verses, with his carrier, with all his ornaments, helmets, bangles, finger rings, bracelets, and beautiful clothing, and Vanamali, the wonderful garland full of forest flowers. Seems that Vanamali, the forest flowers, whether he's Krishna in Vrindavan or Vishnu in Vaikuntha, the forest flowers must remain. That garland of forest flowers is something that Krishna likes in all of his incarnations. And now the rare form, it's not just 4 arms as usual, it's actually 8 arms this time. So more opulence and more weapons like shield and sword and bow and arrows and club and rope. So it's quite impressive. So when Daksha has seen the Lord to a second, or to certain moments, he was even afraid, experienced that overwhelming awe and reverence, and says here that he was first somewhat afraid, but then of course, because he's a devotee, he got attracted by the features of the Lord, his bodily features, but bodily hue and all that beauty, astounding beauty that Lord is the perfection for for the vision of our eyes. So when he got that darshan and those emotions as a the ecstatic love of Godhead has arisen in him, and one of the ecstatic symptoms is they become numb, like you cannot move, or stamba bhava, it's called, that you're so overwhelmed. The peak of that emotions result that you're not movable. So he being unmovable already was in Dandavat. He has offered his obeisances to the Lord and couldn't say anything, couldn't do anything, couldn't request of anything, because he was feeling great satisfaction. The example was given with Dhruva Maharaj, who has experienced very similar experience when he saw the Lord, at that time with 4 hands, and the Lord had the conch, the lotus flower, as well as the other weapons, the Sudarshan chakra and the club. And Dhruva Maharaj was also, even though he was performing austerity specifically, in order to request something, he was so overwhelmed that he completely forgot his request. Not only he forgot his request, he said, "My dear Lord, I have nothing to actually ask from you. I'm completely satisfied." So that yatma supersedity, that is, when you attain the Lord, either through hearing about the Lord, actually, because that's also darshan of the Lord. So at some point, when you have very quality chanting and hearing, that satisfaction comes, the yatma supersedity. So at that moment, you're actually not bothered by any mental demands of your mind, whatever it was before, worries or anything really that was on your mind, whether plans or worries or anxieties or desires of any sort, material specifically. Everything is like vanquished, like it just goes away. It becomes so unimportant. And that can be only experienced through a very quality audience with the Lord, either in Shravanam Kirtanam or any other devotional service, or like in this case, they have actual darshan, all those elevated devotees. Exactly same experience Narada Muni has experienced in his previous life when he was a little boy. So as a 5 years old, his mother was after, and it's interesting that after serving those great sages, after having the remnants of their prasad, after rendering nice service and not being, not disturbing them by silly questions or by any like childhood activities, he was really obedient child and very eager to serve, and was very carefully listening and serving them, and respectfully asking for prasadam, the remnants of prasad. So he got all of that mercy in 4 months, and he has developed that transcendental desires in his heart. And so right after that, his mother got bitten by a snake, venomous snake, and she died. And she was the only protector. And Srimad Bhagavatam is very beautifully described that she bound him by his love. So the bondage was there because he was the only object of her worship and care and love. So when mothers are alone, sometimes it happens that mothers raise children alone. And so it becomes like they're the only object of their love, care, and so they're very, very cautious of everything the child does and protect them, the children or the child, with the best of their ability. And so, with so much attention, a child feels a strong bond, and sometimes that love bonds them. But they're being controlled, and it's hard to break that relationship. So when the mother, Narada Muni, previous life, she died, because he had already transcendental knowledge and transcendental desires in his heart, he took it as a mercy of the Lord, which is very rare. usually such tragedy is super difficult to overcome, the grief, the sorrow, depression, and so forth. And especially when you're very young, 5 years old, you're so dependent on your, parents, or in this case, mother. Like everything you get from them: food, shelter, emotions, pacifying, caring, everything. Yet, little Narada Muni took it as mercy of the Lord, and he decided to go north. And it's described in Bhagavatam that he never left the village. He didn't even know what's out there. I mean, he may have heard it from the sages a little bit, but it's not like he had a geography lessons or something. He was from a very simple family of a maidservant, and he was very young, and so he didn't know anything. He only knew that place where he lived. And I describe how he went for all those different cities and mines and forests and farms and all sort of various landscapes before he got to the place where there was a river, and he sat down to meditate on the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he was taught by the sages. So there's a certain procedure. And Srila Prabhupada explains that you don't concoct those meditation practices. It's given, again, through Guru Parampara. So, but the point I'm leading of that story is that through his determination and enthusiasm, like in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he sat down and eventually he saw Supreme Personality of Godhead. And exactly the same thing, which is like a third testimony now for us. We've seen this happening to Daksha, we've seen this happening to Dhruva Maharaj, and we know the same happened to Narada Muni. He was so overwhelmed with ecstasy. In his case, that wasn't Stamba Bhava. The other ecstasy came from Ashru, from the eyes. There was a torrent of tears flowing from his eyes. Because in Nectar of Devotion, it's explained that when the life force is after experiencing the Lord strongly, if it connects to the water element in your body, then it results in a perspiration or the flow in the tears, the constant torrents of rains of tears. It's not like one drop comes down. It's actually it's unstoppable, and it's very powerful. And like that with air, then you got the goosebumps and the hair stand on end, and the Stamba Bhava, I think, is also connected with air. So it's very technically described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu what ecstasy happens due to which contact of those material elements within your body and the life force. So, but still, the main thing is that what devotee experiences in his mind, which is the sixth sense, the most important sense. So all those senses, in Narada Muni's case, it says that all his limbs like became enlivened, like almost separately. So, and I was thinking, what best analogy in material world would be to describe that awakening of all the senses with this devotion and joy, and like that everything becomes alive. And I've thought of one example of actually a dog. If you ever have had a dog, or you've seen somebody having a dog, you may have experienced that or witnessed that when the dog is waiting for its master to come home, and it may be sometimes late, maybe a person is late from work or something, and so the dog is sitting there under the chair or somewhere very quietly and like almost sleeping, and kind of not joyful, also like missing his master. And it's like almost asleep, and eyes are like full of awaiting of the master. And then all of a sudden the dog hears the master coming behind the door, he recognizes the steps, like the way he walks, even before he sees. So the ears, first the ears are juk of the dog, they're just getting up. And it's like listening. Is it really it, right? And then the dog hears how the master puts the key into the door. And again, the way the master puts the key to the door is different to how the other, say, inhabitants of the house do it. So by just that key, he recognizes and he jumps, all of a sudden jumps from that place where he was sitting. The tail starts spinning. He starts running here and there, barking, but in the joyful, like, woof, 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 right? He's like very, very joyful. The saliva comes from his mouth. The eyes are like full of joy. And when the master comes, he starts jumping and licking and running around and making all sort of noises. It's like a combination of woof, like so. And everything, every single sense of the dog is like awakened by seeing its master. So that's the only really quality that we can glorify dog for, that devotion to its master, because everything else is not so clean and etc. It's an animal, but that one quality of how the dog is looking at its master, how it can recognize the master just by hearing this, the walking, or anything, voice, in any type of clothing, the dog would recognize, because of course it also smells, right? It's got acute sense of smell, so all the senses of the dog are engaged. It recognizes the master by all of those wonderful different senses: hearing, smelling, seeing, etc. And so, but with devotees, when they witness the Lord, even that example, which I was thinking is probably one of the most powerful ones in terms of material kind of illustration, even that will go completely to the shade and almost not noticeable comparing to what devotees experience. It's such a peak of emotions that, like Narada Muni, he at some point, because of his ecstasy and tears, he lost the vision of the Lord and himself. Like he couldn't understand what's happening, where he is, and then Lord also disappeared, which made him even more in anxiety, transcendental anxiety. Because at that moment he reached Bhava Bhakti. It was already spontaneous love of Godhead platform, which is very, very high, very, very desirable level of love of Godhead. It's nice that we have some Shraddha, which is also explained as Adao Shraddha. It's explained it is already love of Godhead, just on a very, very beginning stage of it. So it has to develop through a proper process of having sadhu sangha, hearing it from the devotees like Narada Muni did. Then bhajana kriya, one has to actually start practicing, right? Narada Muni also sat down and started practicing the meditation. And there should be some anartha nivriti. We should get rid of undesired habits of, some impurities in our heart, tendency to criticize, or tendency to have still attachments to the material things and objects, etc., etc. And then eventually we'll get to that nishta platform where we will be very solid in our practice and having a full faith in the Lord, even though we may not know the scriptures yet fully or deeply the philosophy. We completely persuaded who is the Lord, who am I, and what's our relationship, what's the goal, how to attain it, and the happiness already from that solidity is experienced by a devotee. Still, it's about only 60% of work done. There's still 40% of some anarthas or whatever is still there. But from that moment, because it's more than a half, it's easier, right? Whenever you run a marathon or do some task, when it's over, even when you're chanting, if we're not chanting on the Bhava Bhakti and we're just not even noticing rounds going, sometimes there are days when you struggle and you barely get to that 8th round, and then when you got over it, when you got the 9th round, or 10th, it seems like, oh, it's only a little bit left. So So it's easier to chant after that. When devotees are on that sadhana bhakti process, and some days are maybe difficult because of disturbed mind or something. So that little visual process you see in your counterbeats helps. Okay, let me just finish it up. And but then when you finish it, because it's Prabhupada's desire for us to chant minimum 16 rounds, just with that fulfillment of his desire comes many blessings. And so devotee may have felt kind of weird as he was chanting, not transcendental or something, but the time he finishes the 16th round, he feels some yayatma suprasiddhi, he feels some satisfaction that Krishna sends to him, some feeling not just of accomplishment of that I completed 16 rounds, but actually the immunity, the immunity against Maya, and a little bliss that Krishna sends you as a reciprocation to your austerity that you did. And yes, and that makes you actually happy, very happy. So that happiness is described here, but it's described here as a pinnacle, as an ecstasy that those devotees are experiencing. That means that their heart is very pure. It means that, and of course, it got even more purified by seeing the Lord, or having the darshan of the Lord. In Dhruva Maharaja's case, he was so lost that Lord had to bless him by touching his forehead with a conch, so he could start actually speak and express himself. So he helped him out of compassion. So it's very wonderful to see those, or hear those stories, because it's always wonderful to see how Lord is Bhaktavatsala, as explained in this verse. It's one of his prime qualities that devotees love specifically because it's related to them, right? That the Lord is very dear to his devotees. Of course, he's explaining in Bhagavad Gita who are dear to him. There's a whole list of qualities of devotees in both chapters 12 and 18, where he describes that such devotees, Priyosime, that he's very dear to me. And it's expressed there what type of behavior and what devotee is going through, and how he's remaining steady in his devotional service regardless of those dualities and experiences of heat, cold, fame and dishonor, and so forth. And the Lord expressed such devotee is very dear to me. Such devotee is very dear to me. So we can get aspiration from such verses to become favorable by the Lord, so he can actually eventually give us his darshan and bless us with his merciful glance or words, or just his form. That would be a perfection for our eyes. In the meantime, we are humbly continuing and praying for that day to come. But even not that, even better, just to pray for the service, for the pure devotional service to his devotees and to his mission. And in this way, that service attitude would actually attract him to eventually bestow that mercy. And we just have to do our best. If we're doing our best at every circumstances that we are in, this is what matters, and this is what is pleasing to the Lord. I just visited Los Angeles, both temples, Laguna Beach and Los Angeles temple, which was such a wonderful perfection of the trip that I had. But even more than that, of course, seeing specifically Shishirada Dvarkadish, and one of the first murtis of Srila Prabhupada murtis that was installed in 1978. Not of the first, it is actually the first murti that was installed in 1978. It's a very special atmosphere. The deities are so alive and, of course, so beautiful. It was always the temple where the deity worship standard was coming from, and it seems that through all those decades they managed to keeping that standard up. It's really fantastic. Everything is so beautiful. Yeah, sorry, Rukmini Dwarkadish. Yes. Uh, and and but even more than that, seeing the devotees absorbed in their services while performing their household duties, that's what where I got a lot of inspiration. I was staying with Shigalok Prabhu in Radha Mohini and Madhuri, and I woke up as usual before 4, and uh, I came out, and Radha Mohini was already chanting her rounds just before the child wakes up, and so we chanted together. It was such a powerful experience. They have Radha Govinda deities, and that Govinda that they have um, was coming from Pushpamarg in their family lineage. So he's over 200 years old. And their house was served so many times, serving many Vaishnavas, Radhanath Swami, Bhakti Chara Maharaj, and Swami Bhagavan Keshava Maharaj just recently was there. And I really, when I chanted there, I felt like in a temple. I didn't feel like at someone's home. It was really like the temple-like atmosphere. So amazing. And of course, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra deities and Gauritai deities. They have a lot of deities. And they have their own garden growing fragrant flowers, roses, jasmine, champak. Of course, LA climate helps, but still just, having that opulence of offering them fresh flowers every morning with so much love and care. And it just felt like in a transcendental reality. And then, of course, they cannot do the program as we do in a temple because they had to cook breakfast for Madhuri and prepare for the day and so forth. And so as Shigalok dressing the deities, he's chanting all sort of prayers, not just the regular Mangalartam prayers. They chanting Nrsimha Kavacha, Shikshashtakam, and Jagannatashtakam, and some other prayers that I don't even know that they chanted. Some verses I recognize from Chaitanya Charitamrita. And as she's cooking, she's chanting her series of whatever prayers. And I was like, I was just observing it. I was like, this is like spiritual world. Devotees, serving their home deities. They're serving their child who is like a walking deity in a very, very, oh yes, and Madhuri also, she was chanting a little bit of verses in the morning. And just by seeing this, I'm like, this is Krishna conscious house, This is how devotees should live life. Hosting devotees, hosting various programs, always honoring prasadam only. It's just, it's very, very wonderful experience. The way they sorted everything was just like first class. And then I went to another house of devotee where I stayed the last night. And it's also interesting, even though his wife is not a practicing devotee, she's very favorable. Also, they had the altar there, and like how he's working in the corporates, and at the same time he's also chanting his rounds in the morning, reading the scriptures, and always thinking about spreading Krishna consciousness. I'm just observing all of that. I'm always astonished how devotees are focused on what's the main thing, and the rest comes just out of their, like they performing their duties accordingly. Yesterday, I was having lunch here in Philadelphia at devotee's house, Shiva Maharaj disciples, senior disciples, Vishwanath Prabhu and Jai Radha, and wonderful daughter, Dhiramati, 17 years old, so Krishna conscious, learning how to chant bhajans. Like she's taken 8 months course how to actually chant kirtan properly. They go from anatomy of your voice to the depths of understanding philosophy behind the kirtans and bhajans. And the tulsi that they have in their house, even though she's not even near the windows, she's like in a corner. Oh my goodness, it just reminded me of my days back in Ukraine. It's like so big and so rich with manjaris and flowers. Every single leaf is like blossoming. It's like green, juicy. And actually, Chigalak's place also, like leaves are like bigger than I can do like this. It's bigger than my that circle that I'm showing right now. Uh, So yeah, and the Gornitai deities that they have, oh my God, I don't know where they carved those deities. They are so beautiful. I never seen, and they're quite tall also, 18 kilograms apparently, just those two deities. But they're like very like they it's not like Loy Bazaar thing that you go and all the deities look the same. They somehow carved them somewhere 20 years ago. And yes, so again, that house, that house also felt like a spiritual world, exactly like Bhaktivinoda Thakur is describing it. That if you worship Krishna with all your heart, you channel the rounds, the bhajans, and the home becomes transformed, becomes Vrindavan, and that's why Vrinda Devi is so happy there, and she's so opulent. Yeah, the whole family is just an example. I'm gonna have another darshan of these deities today before going to New Jersey. And right now in another house of devotee, Olga, her, she's coming to Gita Nagari. 3 hours driving just to wash the temple and going back the same day, again, 3 hours driving. Who does that these days, It's just amazing, the spirit of devotional service, how she was like preparing here everything to host me with her husband. And I'm like, Olga, what are you doing? I'm not like Maharaj or something. It's just too much. She was cleaning the room half of the day yesterday where I, was sleeping. Anyway, so this trip was just a complete amusement by devotees' bhakti. So this whole 5 days that I'm out of Gitanagari, I'm just experiencing and witnessing that devotees' affection to the Lord and to the devotees, and it just completely mesmerizes me. And yeah, I'm shocked how focused the devotees. I'm so feeling so grateful to experience that and being that association of all those great devotees. Really, all of them are so great devotees. So let us pray to Daksha and Dhruv Maharaj and Narad Muni for them to empower us, because they have realized that knowledge. They all have Vijnana. So if we pray to those devotees, guiding us, giving us intelligence, how to also realize the Lord the way they did. In fact, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is realization of Narada Muni that he passed onwards to Srila Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva, of course, is Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that's a Leela, but at the same time, a proper Leela that Vyasadeva humbly asks for advice of Narada Muni. Narada Muni instructs him, and he's passing down that his realization, because Vyasadeva specifically asks, well, tell me more, how have you realized God? I understood how you explained the story, how you served those sages, but how have you actually realized the Lord? How have you attained his darshan? Could you tell me more details about that process? And then he was saying about his tapasya, his renunciation spirit, and his desire that was intensifying, etc. So I'll stop here. We have another 10 minutes. If you have any comments or questions, you can raise your hand or just speak. Nobody? Okay. Nagari Krishna says, thank you for inspirational class. Yeah, speaking about devotees is always inspirational experience and the Sangha. And actually so much Krishna Katha, oh my goodness, that's another one. With Shigalok and Radhamahini, we were just like every time we sit down for lunch, or it was just a constant Krishna Katha going on, no prajalpa whatsoever, which was so nice. And with other devotees, same yesterday, same thing. We were just indulging in memories of 14 hours kirtans that they have participated in our New Braj Dham, and some pastimes of Shira Maharaj. And it was just like a constant nectar going, churning, and so much laughter, after prasadam, especially with this Krishna Katha. It was just ongoing laughter. Um, yes, I relish those moments with devotees. It's a proper Krishna conscious, like it's explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita. If you dance and honor prasadam and have good katha, there's always a jubilant spirit that is um, kind of non-ending and ever increasing. So I wish everyone to experience more and more of that um, proper consciousness. It's really refreshing, ever new. All right, James, would you like to say something? I know you were driving, but you can just say hi also. Nice to see you online. Oh, Leela Kishori. Oh, there you go. She's writing. Such a beautiful description of the Lord's Bhaktavatsala. Also inspiring to hear your qualification devotees that you're associated with in the trip. Yes, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, so today the trip is continuing. Oh, there you go. Tarak Prabhu. Yes, Tarak Prabhu. You can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I want to thank you for a wonderful and inspirational class. It's wonderful to hear about devotees and the glories of devotees. There's so many wonderful devotees, um, and it becomes glorification of Krishna and the parampara and the entire process of Krishna consciousness, which transforms the hearts of individuals, and they become these amazing personalities. Um, I really enjoyed your discussion of um, various ecstatic symptoms and in particular becoming stunned, which, all of these ecstatic symptoms begin when Srila Prabhupada explains when one comes to the platform of anarta nivriti syat, that all anartas cease. Um, Prior to that point in time, we have, sometimes individuals possessed of a sahajya mentality, taking things cheaply and imitating ecstatic symptoms for the sake of um, uh, notoriety or some such thing. But um, sometimes that happens in our own society. We not so long ago, I guess maybe it was last year, we had to ask an individual who was participating in our Zoom Bhagavatam classes to refrain from doing so and to find another sangha, because it was we detected that he was contaminated with a Sahaja mentality and subscribing to the what Srila Prabhupada describes as nonsense uh, Siddha Pranali. He was starting to encourage devotees towards this kind of a thing. But in contrast to that, we have many devotees who by their sincere practice of Krishna consciousness, um, they become very pure or nearly free of anartas. There is I guess, an interim stage in which sometimes there may be some anartas and other times not, and even at that stage, devotees will begin to manifest um, ecstatic symptoms. Sometimes even very young devotees, because initially they are innocent, and so even they haven't actually done the work of purifying themselves of all anartas, because they are able to chant without offense initially. Sometimes, at least, it happens that way. They may have some experience of ecstatic symptoms very early on, but it doesn't endure. It doesn't last. Um, Many devotees report that they have some extraordinary experiences in the beginning of their Krishna consciousness, and then it stops, and then and they have to do the serious work of purifying themselves, um, because then they begin to commit offenses which were inconceivable to them previously. But there are many devotees who have actually come to the point of regularly experiencing ecstatic symptoms. And I'm talking about ISKCON devotees. Um, you will find that generally they don't make a public show of such things. They hide themselves sometimes for fear of having uncontrolled symptoms in public. Um, and they will discuss such things and reveal them only to other individuals who they trust, very intimate confidants, other like-minded devotees. They will sometimes discuss such things with those devotees, and they will not otherwise talk about it or display such symptoms amongst the general mass of devotees, because it will not be understood. In ISKCON, we have the problem that devotees who are actually advanced are sometimes mistaken to be sahajas, and they are sometimes mistreated because of that. So um, um, devotees, some very advanced devotees will tend not to discuss at all um, their ecstatic symptoms, because even devotees will think that they are crazy, and so they just don't talk about it. And there's actually a GBC resolution that um, says that devotees and especially leaders must chant their rounds in the temple room. They have to be seen to actually be chanting their rounds, so that there can be no question as to whether or not they are completing their rounds. But in spite of that, there are devotees who will avoid chanting publicly, because they are unable to control their ecstatic symptoms, and they're afraid that they will be misunderstood for that. So they find, some place to hide out when they chant their rounds, because things happen. They may start crying uncontrollably, and they can't stop it. They don't try to cry; they just can't help it. As soon as they hear the holy names and the Lord begins to reveal Himself in certain ways, they just suddenly burst into tears, and I mean profuse tears, immense volumes of tears. Um, it becomes a problem, because they're constantly having to mop up tears, and it detracts from their ability to hear and chant. They're just constantly engaged in mopping. Anyway, I hear such accounts from from devotees. Um, Sometimes devotees become stunned. And I am familiar with individuals who sometimes they fall on the ground stunned, and remain in that condition sometimes for 12 hours, completely unconscious of anything external, and just completely absorbed in some aspect of Krishna, just remembering his bodily hue, um, his face, his eyes, his lotus feet, the appearance of his garments, and um, Anyway, these kinds of things are going on. It's a real thing, and devotees are coming to that stage of advancement. And but interestingly, they will tend to be very um, um, what's the word? They um, unassuming. They you would never guess. If you were to meet them, you would think, this is just an ordinary devotee, and they appear to be just like anybody else, just another Prabhu in the ashram, but secretly, this is an individual who is actually extraordinarily advanced, but, only if they revealed that fact, or maybe someone who is very advanced would be able to detect it in them. But it's not obvious. It's not obvious when someone is very advanced. So there are many individuals who are extraordinarily advanced in their Krishna consciousness, but you can't tell. You can't tell that about them. Um, they appear to be just an ordinary rank and file devotee with no particular position, and just going about some simple service. But sometimes maybe you'll get an opportunity to see what really goes on. They may sometimes reveal themselves to you, or sometimes they can't help it, and you suddenly realize, my gosh, this individual is extraordinarily advanced. So I'm reminded of these things by your class, and it's an ecstatic subject matter. I think. And it's wonderful to see the process in action, actually working, and people, devotees, coming to the platform of Anartha Nivritti Syat and beyond, and really absorbing themselves in Krishna Bhakti. Um, it's going on. For all you know, we may have many such individuals here at Gita Nagari, and you will not know. Sometimes devotees are invisible. Sometimes it even happens that devotees don't even appear to be devotees. There are such accounts you will find in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and only under certain, who was that devotee? There was some question as to what his actual level of advancement was, and so it was demonstrated that when he saw something that reminded him of Krishna, a peacock feather, or heard a particular verse or something, he would just fall on the ground, stunned in Krishna consciousness. Anyway, so that happens sometimes, that someone, in rare instances, they will appear to be even an ordinary sense gratifier, but secretly within themselves they're actually very advanced. That's not commonplace, but in ISKCON we do have lots of devotees who experience ecstatic symptoms, and it's not necessarily all the time, but from time to time the symptoms manifest, and they have no control over it. We're out of time. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you. The class is not happening in the temple, so we can wrap up whenever we want to. I just wanted, you reminded me, I also was sharing this with Srigalok Prabhu as we were glorifying various devotees. He was giving me a few wonderful examples in Bhaktivedanta manner, how there was one brahmachari who was cleaning Bhaktivedanta manner on his own. At some point, there was no devotees who was doing that. And, everybody thought, oh, he'll give up at some point because, it's a routine and it's hard and it's such a big property, and how can one person do it anyway? So he was continuing doing that, and next time Srila Prabhu visited, because he already left to Australia or something, he came back 6 years later, and that devotee was still doing it, and he had a team already of inspired devotees who were helping him, cleaning the whole temple and the farm. And then he went again, overseas, and then he came back another 10, 20 years later. So he's now having a medical condition already, so he cannot perform as much as he used to. But he's looking at him, and Srila Prabhu said, I'm just looking at you and I'm seeing clean temple in your heart. Like that you've been cleaning and cleaning and cleaning so consciously and so like with such a determination. And now your heart is so clean. I'm seeing the whole temple in your heart. So there was the exchange, and the Prabhu started crying immediately. So he really became very advanced, actually, and just by cleaning the temple. So can you imagine? So, and then I was sharing the story with one brahmachari who left his body in Vrindavan. Radhika Raman Prabhu is his name, and so he was big distributor, book distributor. He could do 5,000 books in a marathon, Prabhupada's marathon, so like that. So he was really good. But what he was noticing is not the number he was distributing himself, but he was noticing the number, not the number. He was noticing devotees who were actually happy doing that book distribution service. And specifically, he was asking about one Prabhu. He said, why he's standing in the subway so happy? How many books he distributes? He said, and somebody said, oh, he just distributes one book a day, 1 or 2 books a day. So he came up to the Prabhu and asked him, what's your secret? Why are you so happy? What are you doing in the subway? And he said, well, I'm working. I'm a grihastha, so I'm working, and I only have 1 month holiday in a year. And I'm just taking it the whole, every year I'm just taking that holiday 1 month to stand in the subway of Moscow City distributing books. And I'm just feeling so blessed. So he was very open, saying that, like very simple guy. And Radhika, he detected, he said, this is it. You sacrifice in everything that you have for Krishna's service, and the reciprocation is such that you become in complete bliss and ecstasy. So the way Radhika Raman left his body was very auspicious. He was in Vrindavan, and he wrote a poem that I'll jump into Yamuna and the snake will bite me. I'll jump into Yamuna here and I'll come out in Galok Vrindavan. So it was like a poem that he wrote. He was actually writing poems also. It's another Vaishnava quality, being poetic. And so the day before he left the body, he was chanting his rounds in Krishna Balaram Mandir, and he was profusely crying. The tears were really pouring from his eyes. And one devotee, even after japa, he came out to him and said, how do you chant like this? What's the secret? How do you? And he just replied something like, he was shy, and he said, no, you just have to call out like a child to a mother. That's the only thing you need to do. Just call out to Krishna when you chant. And then they ran on the bank of Yamuna with another friend of him. They were just about to have their midday bath. And so one was running after the other, and that other devotee's name was Balaram. So Radhika Raman his last words were, Balaram, catch me, Balaram, catch me. And he jumped into Yamuna. The snake bit him, and he left the body on spot immediately. So in Yamuna, bitten by a snake. And there's like a scriptural descriptions of persons who are like guaranteed going back to Godhead if you get bitten by a snake in Holidam, or if you drown in Yamuna, and he had like combination of 2 out of 3 or 4 that are like known. And yes, so this is very cool. And he was practicing just for 15 years, 15. Imagine, this is maybe a little more, but not more than 20. So this is amazing how much perfection how much mercy and perfection is available in Krishna consciousness if you actually take this process seriously. So let's continue praising those devotees, and one day maybe we'll be blessed by the same results. Okay. Right. Thank you, dear devotees. I appreciate this morning Srimad Bhagavatam conversation. My hosts are already doing something here in the kitchen, so I better help and attend morning program here, Ekadashi. Ekadashi Rata Ki Jai, the blessed day of Ekadashi. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.